Welcome to the JMax Fitness podcast. I am your host, Jason Maxwell, and today's episode is all about my favorite subject, building muscle. But specifically, if you are a scrawny guy or quote unquote bony, then this episode is for you. Now, luckily, I am joined by a special guest, Alain Gonzalez, and he is an expert in this field, and he has a pretty crazy story of his own. So Alain, on your website, it says you were a 23-year-old adult living in a 12-year-old's body. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, so, most people say, oh, I was skinny and then I built muscle or whatever. And then they'll show you their before picture. It was a picture of them in high school. And everybody was skinny in high school, I, however, remained that way into my early 20s. So, yeah, I was 107 pounds. That's the most I had ever weighed.
You say 107?
107.
107.
107.
Wow.
Yeah, to get to 115, I actually had to put in work, right? So where most people go to the gym to build muscle to look muscular, I went to the gym to look normal, right? So my brother, who's always been really into weightlifting, he would occasionally just randomly be like, hey, come to the gym with me, and it just wasn't my thing. Till one day, for whatever reason, he caught me at the perfect time. I said, all right, let's go. So I signed up to the gym, started going with him. He gave me very basic instructions. Number one, work out with me. Number two, when you're not with me, just eat. And so I did. And that was the first time I'd ever seen the scale move past 107 pounds. And that for me was pretty exciting because most of my life I kind of was under the impression that genetically I was just unable to gain any weight, that I would just be naturally skinny. My dad was always really skinny. He still is till this day. And I just thought that I was cursed with skinny genetics. And so for me, gaining a few pounds was a huge deal. And so right away, I thought it was such a big deal that I wanted to share it with other skinny guys. So I said, you know what, I'm going to make a website where it's kind of going to be just like a diary for people to follow along and see that they can gain weight, right? Mm-hmm. And that slowly just snowballed into me making videos on my progress, people asking questions, me getting more interested and learning more. And then over time, till today, writing for websites like T Nation, Muscle and Strength. I've got a few books, programs, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the long story short.
So do you remember the exact moment when you realized enough was enough?
Yeah. And I talk about this. I'm actually in the process of writing a book right now, and I talk about this in the book. And as we were talking about earlier, I was a parent very young, right? So when I was, I would say in my early 20s, I had parent-teacher conferences. I was taking my son to doctor's appointments, and I was an adult, but I didn't look like an adult, and so I didn't feel like one. And these people, these professionals, doctors and teachers, never really let me or made me feel like an adult, right? I always felt like they talked down to me, or that they looked at me with, kind of with that eye that says, poor kid, he's fucked, and so I just wanted to feel like an adult, I just wanted to feel what it was like to go into a parent-teacher conference with confidence and be able to talk to the teacher and get spoken to like I was another adult and not some kid or, sitting across the table from them. And so there was one particular time at a doctor's office. I can't recall every single detail, but I remember enough that I walked out of that doctor's office just furious at the way that he talked to me. He was talking to me as if, again, I was a kid who had a kid, and I don't know, just that day, it just really hit me a little bit harder than usual, because I knew that, he wasn't just an asshole doctor. He really just thought I was some punk kid who had a kid and was, I was that guy to this doctor, and I just didn't want to feel like that anymore,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you decided, you know what? Let's build some muscle, have some confidence, and look like an adult.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said earlier, like I really just wanted to look normal.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to look like an adult. I didn't care to be this huge bodybuilder or whatever. I just wanted to go walk in a room and people say, "Okay, here's another adult."
That's cool. That's an interesting side of things that you don't really get to hear, and that's why I think you have such a great story. So obviously in high school you had to grow up real quick with that first kid. Do you remember what your hobbies were and the kind of people you hung out with in high school up until that point?
Yeah, I actually hang out with the same friends I have to this day. They're all cool guys, good people. I was just into things that were a little bit different than the things they were into. Yeah, we all played sports and things of that nature, but I also was really into writing. So at the time, I used to write a lot of music, and that was pretty much, my life. Like, that's what I did. If I wasn't, with my kid, hanging out with my buddies, I was writing. Like, that was my thing. And then so from there, I start hanging out with other guys who are into music, and so I was really heavy into the what they would call the underground hip hop scene here in Orlando, in Florida. And so a lot of my time was spent with those kinds of characters who are all great people, by the way. And so yeah, so I was juggling my music, school, and fatherhood.
So who are your favorite artists in the underground hip hop scene?
Huh. Well, let's just first, my favorite artist who is no longer underground is Eminem, as he's got that underground vibe, but he's he's past that. But let's see, as far as underground goes, I like a lot of the local guys here. Like, if you listen to my podcast or a lot of my videos, there's music by a gentleman named Am, who is actually one of my best friends, and so I would say he is probably one of my favorite true underground artists. Him, and then we have Joel Ortiz, who was probably more known now that he's part of Slaughterhouse, and yeah, so I'd say those two are two that I listen to more so than anyone else.
Cool. So when you're writing music, were you doing like production or were you rapping?
No, I was rapping.
Cool.
I have songs, bro.
Cool. You want to drop a few lines right now?
Oh man, you really gonna do that?
Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
Oh man, let me see. Yo, I'ma rip you, shoot at you and drop the pistol, run in front of the bullet and catch it before it hits you. You better think twice before battling. I rip mics. My book got ninjas hooked like a fish bite, shook like I'm Suge Knight. Crooks just might run up on you like sleeves in a fist fight.
Damn, that was some sick stuff, man. That's
Oh,
cool,
man.
When I edit this, I'll have to put on some beats in the background.
Oh man, that's too funny. If that makes the cut, that's gonna be hilarious.
That's cool. Yeah, generally I only rap when I'm drinking, but I do listen to like a lot of stuff. I've been getting into MF Doom lately.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen some of your rapping on Snapchat.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's funny. It's good stuff. So when you first started lifting, kind of the thing that is most intimidating is everyone's like, okay, I want to bench press 135 pounds, which is one plate on each side. That's like the first thing you do when you first start getting into lifting. You're like, I got to be able to lift that. What did it feel like to know that that loaded barbell weighed more than you?
It's funny. This is another thing that I actually talk about in the book I'm writing, was that was the goal in the beginning, was to be able to push that 135 pounds. Because as a lifter, you know what it's like to finally be able to hit a plate, So, to be honest with you, it wasn't intimidating. But it was always because I had my brother there, He was, he made that transition of going to the gym and feeling weak and being embarrassed a lot easier because, he was there with me. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't intimidating. It was more exciting to see that I was progressing each week. So whether it was 5, 10 pounds that I was increasing, I knew that eventually I would be there. And so it was more exciting than anything. What was intimidating was when I got stuck around 185 pounds and I thought I'd never be able to do 225 for reps. That was intimidating because at that point I was on my own.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that your brother was probably your first mentor?
Terms of
the fitness?
I'll put it this way. Yeah, I'll put it this way. And he knows this. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. Period.
That's pretty sweet. He must feel good about that too.
Yeah, he throws it in my face occasionally, jokingly, of course, but he takes credit.
Yeah, so can you go in a little bit more depth of what your fitness and nutrition approach was when you started this transformation?
Yeah, so like I said, in the very beginning, it was very basic. Work out with me. We were doing whatever, bro splits, mm-hmm. and eat a lot. So at the time, I had a 9-to-5 job. You can ask anybody who worked with me. I was constantly in the back room making peanut butter sandwiches. If I wasn't working, I was eating, and I was just stuffing my face as much as possible. And that was enough to get the scale moving. Now, at a certain point, because I wasn't tracking, that weight gain stalled. And so I won't get into all the details, but eventually I came up with what I call the Ballpark Method. And the Ballpark Method is a very basic strategy that I recommend to all skinny guys who are beginners. And that is, you take your body weight, you multiply it by 20. And the reason we choose 20 is simply because it's going to be a hefty enough surplus for you to gain weight immediately. Another reason is because when you're eating that many calories, it's hard not to get your protein, carbs, fats, and all your vitamins and minerals from your diet, even when you're not tracking for specific macros. So if you are, 125 pounds and you're eating whatever that equates to be 2,500 calories or so, chances are you're going to get enough protein, fats, and carbs just from hitting that amount of total calories. And so it also eliminates a lot of the stress or overwhelm that a lot of guys get in the beginning. They already have to go to the gym 3-4 days a week. And then on top of that, they have to figure out their maintenance. They have to weigh food, calculate it in an app. And so this strategy eliminates all of that. All you got to do is look at what you're eating, calculate the total calories of that meal, and subtract it from your total. Do that for every meal until you hit 0, and boom, you're done. And the great thing is that you don't have to be super accurate. You just got to be consistent. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're doing that, you're going to get enough calories, you're hitting enough protein, fats, and carbs. And as long as you're progressing in the gym, you're going to grow. So I think it takes a lot of the, again, overwhelm off of the newbie trainer who doesn't necessarily even know what a macronutrient is,
Mm-hmm. I actually love that idea, and I've never even heard of that before. So I'm glad you spoke about that. It's kind of funny because I really think with a beginner, simple is better. Because what happens when you get discouraged? You don't want to go to the gym anymore, and then you're missing your workouts, and then you don't get the results. So that Ballpark Method is pretty simple, and I love it. So you were using this ballpark method until you became like a quote unquote intermediate?
Yeah, and then I was just at the point where, and that's why the ballpark method is more so for a beginner, because the beginner is hyper responsive to training. So he can gain a lot more muscle than an intermediate trainee. And so he can afford to be in a heftier surplus.
Mm-hmm.
When you become an intermediate or advanced, you got to be a little bit more calculated. You don't want to gain the same amount of weight. You don't want to be in as large of a surplus because you can't gain as much muscle mass. And so as an intermediate, you have to be a little bit more calculated or meticulous with your macronutrient intake.
Yeah, for sure. So you were saying that your dad was a super skinny guy and then you and your brothers were pretty skinny.
Mm-hmm.
But you beat your genetics. So how much do you think genetics come into play?
I think genetics are a huge factor. And I'll tell you why. My brother, we're brothers, right? I mean, we're like, you can't get any closer to the same genetics than your brother. And I'm just assuming, maybe I'm wrong, but I would assume that because we're brothers, our genetics are pretty similar in terms of our ability to build muscle. You guys can see my brother. He's been on my videos. He's been on my Instagram. He looks like a huge bodybuilder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's got what, 18-inch arms roughly, something like that, and he's about 5'6". So you can see, yeah, 18-inch arms on a guy his height. He's pretty big. He's about 170 pounds, but he looks over 200. And I'll never look like that. I just don't have the genetics. I can't eat my way that big, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that most people have average genetics and thus the word average, right? So if you have average genetics, which most people do, you can gain a solid physique. You might not be Mr. Olympia. Most of us won't be. But I think that you can look at it two ways. You can say, okay, well, I'm fucked because my genetics suck. Or you can look at it and say, well, I have average genetics, so I can look just as good as most people, And so I think that I can look just as good as most people. I don't think I have poor genetics. I wouldn't say that. I did start at a disadvantage, I would say. I was so skinny that I had to gain 20 pounds before I even looked normal. But in terms of my ability to build muscle is just as good as the next guy's.
Okay, so do you think you were skinny because of genetics or just because you didn't eat?
Yeah, and I think those go hand in hand, Like a naturally skinny guy typically doesn't have the appetite, stomach's small because he doesn't eat. Mm-hmm. And so I think, yeah, I do believe it was genetic. But it also is the fact that I didn't eat, like I was playing sports all day, running around. And when I did sit down for dinner, it was 2 or 3 bites and I was done. The biggest meal I had was probably after school. I had like a sandwich and a glass of milk, and that was it. The rest of the day I was head down either in sports or in writing music or whatever it was at the time. And so, but there was other buddies of mine who kind of ate the same way I did and did the same things I did, and they weren't as skinny as I was, So I do think that it was partially genetics, but also I wasn't eating enough to sustain any kind of growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So let's say a super skinny guy came to you, like let's say under 135 pounds, 5'11", 6 feet tall.
By the way, 135 pounds, you're not skinny, bro. You're normal.
Well, coming from a guy who is 107. Okay, so let's say someone comes to you, they're 110 pounds, and they're like 5'11". What would you do with them over the course of a year if they listen to you?
Yeah. Well, the first 6 months to a year is going to be very easy, believe it or not. You're going to grow like weeds in a time lapse if you, number one, follow a proper program, and number two, follow something as basic as the ballpark method. If you're eating enough, right, and you're getting enough protein, the only other thing is, of course, your training, which I recommend typically a 3 to 4 day full body split where the frequency is high but the volume is low enough for you to recover easily from, and just progress. As long as you can go in the gym, you know exactly what you hit last week or last workout, and you can do a little bit better. If you can do that for 6 months to a year and you're eating enough, right? You're eating in that hefty surplus, then you're going to grow. I mean, and then, of course, over the course of 6 months to a year, if that surplus is constant and if that progress is constant, you're going to put on a good deal of muscle. I would say close to the maximum potential, which most experts would say is well over 20 pounds of pure lean muscle tissue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I see a lot of beginners. It's always between 20 and 30 pounds in the first year, but it's usually over 25 based on just my experience. But that's a ton of muscle to put on in a year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you'll look completely different.
Mm-hmm.
You'll look completely different.
And then what about the next year then? What would you do with them differently, if anything?
We would get a little bit more calculated with the nutrition, right? We're not going to aim to gain the same amount of weight anymore. Mm-hmm. And then we would periodize the training program a little bit differently because they're not going to be able to progress in a linear fashion like they were before. And so, I don't know, maybe something like the DUP method.
Solid
that's
choice.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I followed for a while. Whatever template you decide to follow, as long as you are getting stronger at the main lifts, and you're eating enough, like I said, you're going to grow. The thing is that people expect to look like Arnold after 2 years, and it's just not the case, you know? And the reason that happens is because we got guys on Instagram who are on tons of juice, putting up pictures of certain creatine that they're taking. And so most people think, okay, well, if I take this creatine and I go to the gym 5 days a week and eat chicken breast and broccoli like this guy, then I'll be ready to compete. And although after 2 years you may be ready to compete, I think that it's giving false expectations of what is reality, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, most people, when they compete their very first time, if they follow the program properly and they're lean enough on stage, they usually look almost scrawny, but it's very lean. Because
100%.
Because those first couple years, you haven't put on enough muscle to look the way you want on stage. But when you're down to like 5% body fat, you're going to look small. But once you get up to something reasonable, like around 10% or even 12%, you're going to look big, especially in person. So yeah, that's the interesting thing that I've noticed really about competing. But what would you say are like the go-to exercises for these type of guys?
What type of guys? We're talking about the beginners? Well, I guess it wouldn't even matter.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter, but yeah.
I don't think it really matters. I think that there's 6 key movements that everyone should have in their program, and they should be the focal point, or at least a variation of them. A horizontal and vertical push, a horizontal and vertical pull, and then a lower body push and a lower body pull, right? So I'll give you the basic ones: bench press, overhead press, bent row, pull up, squat, and deadlift. You know, obviously there's other variations of the horizontal and vertical pulls and pushes and lower body pulls and pushes, but those, as long as there's a variation of those and that's the focal point of your training and you're getting progressively stronger in those lifts, you're going to maximize growth, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny you said that, because when I very first started lifting, my program was literally that 3 to 4 days per week. Yep. And it was over the course of like, I think 4 months, I gained 27 pounds of muscle, but then it kind of stagnated that full year. It was kind of crazy, like hyper responded to that. So I always tell people, like, if you're a strict beginner, start out with that simple program and just get stronger each and every day.
Yeah. And I was going to say, like, if you're a beginner, just those 6 exercises, maybe each one twice a week or however you want to split it up will do the trick. Now, once you get a little bit further into your lifting career and you need to add volume, that's when you want to throw in a little bit of accessory or isolation work, to mainly just to increase the volume. That's all you're really doing by adding those lifts in, because you can't get as strong on, say, the squat as fast as you were initially. So maybe now you want to add some leg extensions for that extra stimulus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that approach. It's very simple, and it's almost exactly the same as mine. I always think that we have really similar training philosophies, which is really cool whenever I get to talk to you. But what are some philosophies that you use or techniques that you use that other trainers don't?
I'll be honest with you, man. Like, I just keep shit simple,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like keeping things simple is the best way for anybody to achieve a goal, no matter what it's in. And too many trainers try to use too big of words and overcomplicate things and make the trainee feel like he's just trying to show his dick, pretty much, is what the trainer's trying to do. Show you how much he knows, how intelligent he is, and try to make it seem like it's this long, arduous process. And it is, but it's not complicated, right? So it's simple, but it's not easy. And so that's my thing. I just keep things simple. And I think that when you keep things simple, the overwhelm decreases, and so the adherence increases. You're not overwhelmed. You're not stressed. You're not worried about this or that. You just do the work, and so that's how you grow. When you're too worried about, oh man, I missed a few grams of protein, or I wasn't able to progress this week, should I reset or should I deload? And you're worried about all these factors, then what happens is you get overwhelmed, and essentially you just end up spinning your wheels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true, actually. And that's why I think we have such similar fitness philosophies. Is simple works really well if it means that the adherence is really well, and adherence translates to great results time after time after time.
Right.
So let's change it up a bit. Which coaches, online or online, have you had that have had the biggest impact in your life?
Oh, okay. We're talking about fitness?
Not necessarily, just coaches in general, people who've had a big impact on you. Maybe at least throw in one fitness coach in there.
Yeah.
Or mentor.
A mentor, and I don't know him personally. And this is I'm a big believer in that. If you can't reach somebody and have them mentor you personally, then indulge in their work. And so one person's work that I really get into, in fact, I have I believe a few of his books, but I just picked this one up, is Brad Schoenfeld. He is, in my opinion, the leading expert in muscle hypertrophy. And then in terms of nutrition, I like a lot of Alan Aragon's work. I'm also a huge fan of Eric Helms. And then as far as business goes, one of my biggest mentors is actually a good friend of mine named Chad House, which I believe was on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And then us together on one of the businesses that we work on have hired Dave Ruel, the muscle cook.
Oh, and cool.
Yeah, that's really changed the game. And so, yeah, I'd say in terms of non-fitness related, I'd say Chad. He's made a huge impact in my life, especially in the last 2 years.
That's cool. Yeah, we had Chad on here a couple episodes ago. It feels like a long time ago now. And yeah, he's a really cool guy.
Yeah.
Back to Brad's book. What do you think of it so far, the new one?
The new one, it's awesome. The thing is that I have another one, the Max Muscle Plan. You can read it through and then follow the program. This is more like a textbook. So if you got a certain question, a certain topic in terms of hypertrophy that you really want to dive into, you flip to that. It's not a book that you sit down and just read through, right? It's a textbook. So if there's something that you have a question about, or you're not really sure about, or you want to double check, then it's a great resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Max Muscle Plan was a game changer when that came out. I'm waiting until I'm moving away from where I live now. So when I move back to Canada, I'm gonna get Brad's book and then keep it in my library and definitely give that a read. That's definitely on the top of my, I guess I should say, Christmas list.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now with your workouts and your nutrition?
Right now, I'm so focused in work. I've got my head down on this book, and then I got some projects I'm working on with Chad, and so my fitness and nutrition is pretty intuitive right now. Just kind of going by feel. I'm going in. I'm focusing on the main lifts. I'm doing a little bit of accessory. I'll throw in some cardio just to keep my conditioning. I'm pretty much just maintaining. I'm not tracking my nutrition. I'm kind of just eating intuitively, keeping a mindful eye. I'm not much of a binger. I'm not really into sweets or anything like that. So it's pretty easy for me to stay within my maintenance without having to track. And so, that's what I'm doing right now. Now, that's not something I recommend for someone who's interested in either getting shredded or getting bigger. That's just me right now. With my focus, I'm kind of just maintaining in that area.
Very cool. So every guest I have on, I have 4 rapid fire questions. If you listened to the podcast before, you know what the questions are. But yeah, I ask everyone these questions. So are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. What kind of things are you doing in your life right now to bring you happiness?
Shit. I don't mean to get all philosophical, but I feel like I just chose to be happy, So whether I'm stuck in traffic or I'm playing with my kids, either way, I'm happy, But if you want to get into the real nitty gritty, work, that's where I have that sense of flow, and that's where, I don't know, I'm sure you can agree, like when you're working and you're getting shit done, there's just a sense of euphoria.
Yeah, it's a nice feeling. Crossing things off the list.
Yeah.
What would be your profession if you weren't doing fitness right now?
Whoa. It'd have to something with writing. Honestly, I have no idea. I've never even thought about that. I don't think about that, but it probably, just because I enjoy the art of writing so much, it would have to be something with writing.
Maybe rapping.
Maybe rapping. Maybe I'd be a rapper. Who knows? I may come back.
Yeah.
After this episode.
Make a comeback. What's your rap name?
If we hold on, we'll get into that. If we have anybody listening who can get me a record deal, I'm happy to get back into the game.
Well, yeah, you already showed off some of your talent too.
This is embarrassing. My rap name was Clarity, and it was because my main focus when I was rapping was to be very clear in my words, which is funny because it's what I do now when I'm writing,
Huh. That's pretty cool. That's not embarrassing at all, though.
I don't know. I mean, just for me, you know how it is, like shit from your past. It's just like, oh man, that was cringeworthy.
Yeah, that's funny. If you were to buy your 20-year-old self 2 books, 1 fiction and 1 nonfiction, which books would you give yourself?
Whoa. Okay. The nonfiction would be the 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. That book lit a fire under my ass. As far as nonfiction, I don't really read nonfiction. To be quite honest with you, I'm looking at my bookshelf here and I see none. No nonfiction. I couldn't even tell you one off the top of my head. And so if I had to choose a second book, it would be, and I should know this, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Okay. I'm just writing that down right now. These books will be in the show notes after this episode. War of Art.
The War of Art is a short and simple read, but the message is fucking powerful. So if you haven't read it, whether you or anyone listening, please read it. It's like $10 on Amazon. You'll read it in 2 days. But just the message in that book is it's intense. It's really changed the game for me.
That's very cool. So last question. Where can people learn more about you?
Everything is at Muscle Monsters with an S at the end. So musclemonsters.com, that's the main hub where I write, post my podcast episodes. I'm YouTube famous. I've got almost 40,000 subscribers there.
Oh, damn. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So that's youtube.com/Muscle Monsters. And then, of course, Snapchat and Instagram, if you want to see me shirtless, that's at Muscle Monsters as well.
Very cool. Yeah. And can you tell people more about your Bony to Brawny program?
Yeah, so Bony to Brawny is specifically created for the naturally skinny guy who's just getting into weightlifting. I'd say if you're within the first 6 months to a year, then this program was created for you. What it is basically exactly what I did in the beginning, once I kind of figured things out, to put on my first 27 pounds of lean mass.
Very cool. And I'll definitely link that in the show notes as well. Were you about to say something else?
Yeah, that program, although I didn't follow meal plans in the beginning, I followed what we discussed earlier, the Ballpark Method. But the program also has a calculator that calculates your macronutrient distribution in the event you don't want to follow the Ballpark Method and want to be more specific. But it also comes with meal plans specific to your current weight, which as a beginner is perfectly fine. So if you're skinny and you weigh X amount, then you know exactly what meal plan to follow. And I also show you how to adjust them when necessary.
Very, very cool. So guys, you heard it here. Go to www.jmaxfitness.com/podcast and check out the episode with Alain, and I'll have all this linked in the show notes. So it's if you're gonna check out Bony to Brawny, you're gonna love it, and I'll have a link to that program right there. Any last words you want to leave the listeners?
Yeah, whether it's fitness or business or anything you want to accomplish in your life, work your fucking ass off for it, Make it a priority. I'm not saying put the gym before your kids, but don't go to a job you hate for 12 hours and then not come home and work on your own shit for an hour.
Very cool. That's a very powerful message too. So you guys heard it here first, straight from Alain Gonzalez. Alain, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you and hearing about your story and helping you share that story too.